Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. This is literally the cradle of civilization, where humanity first figured out things like agriculture, writing, even the wheel. But today, this ancient heartland, well, it's facing a catastrophic crisis. Its lifeblood, the very rivers that birthed history itself, are disappearing. And to really get what's at stake, we need to listen to the people who actually call these riverbanks home.
These are the words of Sheikh Nidham. He's a religious leader for the Mandaean people in southern Iraq. And for him and his community, you have to understand this isn't just some environmental issue on the news, it's an existential threat. His words really cut to the very heart of this story. What happens when a sacred river starts to die? And this connection to the river, it runs so incredibly deep. The Mandaeans, they're one of the world's oldest Gnostic religions, and for over 1,000 years, the Tigris River has been their temple. I mean, every single crucial rite of passage, from being born to getting married to the final cleansing before death, it all has to happen in its waters. So when the river shrinks, their entire way of life, their very faith, is threatened with extinction.
Okay, so let's start right there with their story, a faith literally born of water.
And now, from this one community's story, we're going to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the vanishing rivers and the huge crisis they represent for the entire region. I mean, just stop and think for a second about the history held in this land. The Tigris and Euphrates, they watered what we call the Fertile Crescent, which allowed humanity to just flourish in ways that had never been seen before. So we're not just talking about any river system here. This is where so much of our shared human story began. And the contrast between that past and the present day, it is absolutely shocking. The birthplace of empires has become this withered landscape. A river that was once mighty enough to sustain entire civilizations can now, in some places, be crossed on foot. That one image tells you everything you need to know about how severe this crisis is. And this isn't just about ancient history. We're talking about right now. Over 23 million people depend on the Euphrates alone for drinking water, for farming, for their daily survival in a really arid part of the world. The scale of human dependency is just immense. So the big question is, how did we get here? Well, this isn't just some natural disaster. What we're really looking at is a man-made drought, and it's driven by us, by the human factor. The problem is basically coming from three directions all at once. First, you've got these massive dams being built upstream. Then, you've got the intensifying effects of climate change making everything hotter and drier. And finally, downstream you have rampant pollution and just critical mismanagement of what little water is left. It's a perfect storm. So let's break that dynamic down a little. Upstream, countries like Turkey, Syria, and Iran have built these enormous dams. And yeah, this gives them power and water, but it drastically, and I mean drastically, reduces the flow for their downstream neighbor, Iraq. And what happens to the water that does finally make it there? Well, within Iraq itself, it's often overused and then heavily polluted. And just look at the result over time. A staggering 60% reduction in the river's flow since the 1960s. This isn't something that just happened overnight. It's a slow-motion catastrophe that's been decades in the making. Now, it's really easy to point fingers upstream, but this number, wow, this reveals a critical internal problem. A massive 85% of Iraq's own surface water is being consumed by agriculture, and a lot of the time it's through really inefficient, old-school methods. This internal overuse just makes a desperate situation so much worse.
Okay, so now let's turn to the devastating consequences. What happens when life, already on the brink, gets pushed right over the edge?
See, less water means more concentrated pollution, and the results can be devastating. Back in 2018, in the southern city of Basra, this turned into a massive public health emergency. Get this, over 118,000 people were hospitalized from drinking contaminated water. This is the direct human cost. And the infrastructure to prevent this kind of thing, it's just not there. Only about 30% of urban homes are even connected to sewage treatment, and in rural areas, it's less than 2%. So yeah, most of the waste just flows directly into the rivers, creating a toxic mess. And of course, the tragedy extends beyond people. The drying marshes and polluted waters are absolutely devastating the ecosystem. We're talking about unique and endangered species, from the Euphrates soft-shell turtle to river otters, and these majestic birds like the steppe eagle. They're losing their homes and they're facing extinction. So this brings us to our final and maybe most important question.
What is truly lost here? Because it is so much more than just water.
Let's circle all the way back to where we started, to Sheikh Nidam and his people. As their sacred river dies, so does their community in their ancient homeland. The Mandaean population in Iraq has completely collapsed to fewer than 10,000 people, as families are just forced to flee. This is cultural annihilation happening in real time.
Now, there are official attempts at solutions, like this so-called oil for water deal between Iraq and Turkey. The idea is pretty simple. Iraqi oil money pays Turkish companies to come in and fix water infrastructure. But, well, experts are highly critical. They point out that it's not actually a binding treaty, it's super vague on the details, and some have just dismissed it as little more than propaganda timed for elections, not a serious long-term fix.
And the clock is ticking. This is not some distant, far-off threat. Leading analysts are warning that without urgent, dramatic action, these rivers could effectively dry up completely by the year 2040. I mean, that's less than 2 decades away.
So we end where we began, with that question. What is truly lost when a river like the Tigris or the Euphrates dies? It's not just a water source. It's thousands of years of human history. It's a vibrant ecosystem. It's the culture of ancient peoples who call its banks home. It's the cradle of civilization itself, turning to dust.